Hello, humans.
This is Mike and Dave's Multiverse. Welcome to our series of interviews where we share the experiences, stories, and insights of our friends from all walks of life in all corners of this beautiful globe.
We hope you find the conversation interesting, illuminating, and uplifting. The goal of our channel is to bring people together, so please subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's interview, hit the like button and leave us a comment.
Thanks for watching. Greetings, humans.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, Chris.
Yeah, my name's Chris, and well, I've got an interesting story like a lot of people. So I'm here to talk with Dave and Mike and, let you know a little bit about life as an amputee and a veteran.
That's exciting. We're really excited to have you on the show today. Mike was excited to meet you a couple of weeks ago, and so we've been looking forward to this interview since then. So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
You're quite
Hey,
welcome.
can you start by telling us maybe where you were born and grew up, how you got here?
Sure. I was raised in just outside of Philadelphia in the suburbs there, and grew up in the 60s and 70s, hippie era, and joined the service in 74. And high school dropout, got my GED and managed to get into the Air Force, and didn't want to end up in the Vietnam War. And so anyway, I enlisted in the Air Force and ended up working in nuclear missiles for my tour of duty there for 4 years. And stationed in Tucson, Arizona, and got discharged in 78. And while I was in, I broke my back and my neck.
Jeez.
And that was a result of a practical joke by my cohorts in the service. And anyway, it didn't derail my, career there, as it were, only 4 years, but didn't cause a discharge. And then I got out of the service, and about a year and a half after I got out of the service, I was run over by a drunk driver on my motorcycle in 1979 and lost my leg. And
Wow.
that was a unexpected event. Nobody expects those things, and it changed my life dramatically.
How old were you at the time?
24 years old, right in the prime of my life, just out of the military and freaking, cut nails with my teeth if I wanted to. And, 1 minute I'm thriving and the next minute I'm barely surviving.
Yeah, I can not relate to losing my leg, but I can relate to feeling strong and young one day, and then all of a sudden being injured and having to deal with that. I've had several surgeries, and so I can't imagine, that what that feeling must have been like switching from day to day. How did you handle that? Like, how long did it take you to kind of get used to the new normal?
It took me quite a while to get used to the new normal. Actually, I don't know if I've ever fully adjusted to it. It's a post-traumatic sort of a deal.
Sure.
1 second. Well, the day before I was run over, I'd just taken a new job a week and a half earlier. And the day before my wife and I were run over, my boss came up to me and told me he thought he'd made a mistake. And I was like, oh, hell, what the hell's going on? I did all the work. I was a machinist at the time and had done all the work. Everything went through inspection, no problem. Then I see my boss smiling, and he's like, you think if we gave you more money, you'd be able to put some tools in that box? And so they gave me a raise, $3,000 a year raise, and that was in 79, which was huge money. And the very next evening on June 21st, my wife and I were taking a sunset ride on the motorcycle, and a drunk driver came at us doing 70 miles an hour on a 2-lane highway, and got about 50, 60 feet away from me and locked onto my headlamp and came right across the center line and smashed into us and the bike, and then drove away with a piece of my leg in the car. And so it took a lot to get used to that. My wife never got used to it. She ended up becoming an alcoholic after that. She was a freaking genius, and it just ruined her. We ended up getting divorced about a year and a half, 2 years after the accident. It was, brutal on both of us. and we were just young and had no support from anybody except, family, and the government turned their back. They told me I wasn't disabled with a missing leg. And
You got no help from the VA?
no, because I was out of the military. So I got nothing from the VA. And then when I went down to Social Security, they told me they'd like to help me, but one leg wasn't considered a disability at the time. And, go back to work. It was a really shitty situation. I mean, what do you do when that happens? Fortunately, I was able to return to work, and my boss was very good about the job. He gave me a return to work position where I was sitting down rather than standing in front of a milling machine for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Anyway, yeah, I'd say before I could actually walk and get around without a cane, it was probably a good 2.5 years before I gave up my cane.
Wow.
And I still have crutches and cane in the other room.
Because you have bad days and good days, or?
Just in case.
Well, right now, over the past 2.5 years, I'm working on my third leg in 2.5 years. Just because the prosthetists that you work with to make your leg, well, it's like finding a good doctor or a good mechanic for your car.
Right.
It's a hit or miss situation. And my background now has given me a skill set where I'm able to construct the leg myself using a 3D printer. I'm learning to print. I'm learning the materials. I'm learning to use CAD. All this sort of siphons on my skills I've already developed. And my hope is to generate a leg with my printer that's better than what's available on the market today.
Wow.
That's incredible. And you were even sharing with me a design for the joint that would self-adjust throughout the day as your body changes.
Yeah, the body's dynamic and changes throughout the day. People will tell you they stand on the feet all day, their feet start to swell. The older you get, a residual limb has the same problem. So as you are in your socket, hold on a minute. That's a socket that my limb slides into. And anyway, over the course of the day, that will shrink. And as it does, your leg falls further into the socket and the positions for weight bearing change, and it can become very painful and uncomfortable. And after wearing a prosthetic limb for 45 years and having worked in machine tool industry for 20 years and being a retired occupational therapist with nearly 20 years experience, I now have the tool set that enables me, with a little bit of research and learning, to design a leg that will be hopefully better than what's available on the market. That's my goal. I've wrote up a plan. I'm following it. And, well, you know what they say about plans too, all the plans with men and mice. But hopefully this will come to fruition. And when it does, well, I'll be a more satisfied man. Because happiness is something that doesn't involve a leg. It involves something intrinsic.
Right.
That's true. I wanted to ask about, you were an occupational therapist for 20 years, you said? And so was that part of the plan? Like you decided to become an occupational therapist to then help yourself and others, or?
Well, it's a long story, but the story summed up in a nutshell would be, in the 90s, I saw the machine tool industry evolving more to automation, CNC equipment. And even though I've had CAD programming courses and I know how to program machine tools for machine centers and so forth, I'm a manual person. I prefer using index heads, surface plates, like they did it in the old days, back in the 50s and 60s before computers. It's more satisfying for me personally. I'm not much of just a push a button and let it do itself kind of a guy.
Right.
And the money, frankly, I'll have all this knowledge and trig and materials and feeds and speeds. I mean, there's a whole science to machining. and they really don't pay you very well for it. And I do with the medical field, and my own experiences, having broken my back and my neck and losing my leg, I'd had a lot of care and so forth. And my mother was a nurse. You know, you get exposure over the years. But anyway, I wanted to be a physical therapist. And I went to the VA because I told them it was too painful for my back and my leg to stand around the machine all day long. And they agreed. And they sent me back to school. And I became a occupational therapist after 5 years. And anyway, after I got out of school, I practiced occupational therapy in a number of different settings.
Yeah, I think that's cool because you learned a lot about how to help yourself from going through physical therapy and occupational therapy and all that stuff. So kind of was a next step, a logical next step, right?
Yeah, but it was basically driven to making a leg because, if I could find a good mechanic for my car, I'm okay with it. I won't do the work myself. I know how to do work. I put engines and pulled engines in cars. But anyway, if I could find a prosthetist to make a good leg, I wouldn't, I was down to the man today, and he's going to make me a brand new socket on a brand new leg. I just had him delivered me back in, he gave it to me Halloween. And here I am giving it back to him for a brand new socket again because it doesn't fit right. My leg opened up. I mean, I've never had an open wound on the end of my stump. I showed you that the other day there when I bumped into you, Mike. I had a photo of it on my phone. And, after 45 years, it's kind of startling to have a wound on the bottom of your limb. It's like having an open wound on your heel or the ball of your foot.
Right. When
and
did
it's
you
going backwards instead of forwards? By now, you need to have something that's reliable and comfortable that you can be mobile with.
Oh, absolutely. And besides, I'm not your typical 69-year-old man. I bike, I hike, I like to ski, kayak, whatever. I'm not very sedentary. I don't like being around the house.
Yeah, I think that's pretty amazing though. Like 45 years with a prosthetic leg, and you're biking and hiking probably more than people with, not probably, definitely more than most people with two legs. When did you decide, screw this, I'm going to make my own leg?
Well, about 2 years ago, I was living in Oregon, and I moved from Oregon to Georgia because I have two brothers in Georgia, and that's my entire family. And they were tired of going to the West Coast, and it's a long way. They said, okay, I'll go back to Georgia. Anyway, I came to Georgia, and just before I left Georgia, I got a brand new leg with a brand new suspension system in it. It was state of the art. And I enjoy the suspension system, which actually contacts my leg. It's a marvel of science. It's beautiful. What I have a problem with is this character that fits into it. Here's a suspension system, actually. This one goes right on my skin. And it's like a giant, thick condom. And it's got a padded nose to it with a pin in it. And somewhere around here, I got a pin. But anyway, the pin interlocks with the shuttle, blah, 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 and holds my leg attached. That carbon part is what they have a difficult time with. And I have my little shop right here. Want to take a look at it?
Yeah.
Sure.
There's my box. Cool. My television shit from the years back.
Oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And there's my printer there.
Wow.
You can really see it at all. Bent, of course. There's a couple couplings I've been working on.
Cool.
So, anyway,
I know nothing about 3D printing. Magic to me.
just reading about it.
What considerations have you got for materials of construction for the socket that you intend to make?
The one I'm going to make it out of is a nylon carbon. It's got a carbon fiber that's powderized into little. They do it in linear strands. It's not just dust, but it's all microscopic. And they put it in a nylon And nylon's extremely tough and durable, and the carbon just adds more rigidity and toughness to it. And the current ones I'm wearing are a carbon fiber, but it's a material they lay up and then they put a resin on it and vacuum mold it is the way they do it. Whereas the printing process, which is one layer at a time, it's approximately the page of a book. Very thin, very, very thin layers.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with nylon, all plastics have their properties. I'm learning this just as I learned about various materials: stainless, aluminum, brass, bronze. There's a whole, list of materials for metalworking, as there is with plastics for 3D printing. One of the easiest plastics to print that I've run across so far is the so-called PLA, polylactic acid, which prints at a fairly low temperature. It's made out of cornstarch, interestingly enough. And
I think, were they also using that to make drinking straws for like fast food restaurants?
I
seem
think
to
that's
remember.
part of the program for recycling and green, exactly.
Yep.
But anyway, it's very easy to print with. So I've been learning the technique of printing with that because it's cheap plastic to print with. It's biodegradable. The nylon, on the other hand, prints at a much higher temperature, and it's very prone to curling like a potato chip when you're printing it. So if you lay the print down, the ends will start to pull up off the build surface. And then when you continue to print, the head will bang into it, and there goes your print, you're done. So anyway, I've ordered new material for a build plate. It's actually supposed to come in today. I'm going to heat up my chamber. I've got an enclosure that you saw there that the printer sits inside.
Yep.
I'm going to get some heat lamps and put it in there, a heat lamp. It's a fairly small space. And I want to maintain the temperature somewhere between 140 and 160 degrees inside the chamber while it's printing. And that will enable the nylon to set up properly without deforming and so forth and so on. But, like I say, it's an evolving process. I'm learning as I go, so it's not like, oh, this is going to be a snap. The CAD I learned back on in the early 90s is so much different than the CAD today. I mean, the CAD today, holy smoke, it's powerful stuff. So anyway, it's keeping my brain young at least, if nothing else.
Right. You're living a lifelong journey of learning, which I think is cool, as well as you haven't slowed down. Some people, they have a traumatic injury and they become sedentary. You've done the opposite, which I think is pretty impressive.
Well, I spent the majority of my occupational therapy career doing home care. And home care is fascinating and it's great work because it gives the therapist a great deal of autonomy. You write your own schedule. You're not under any pressure to admit people. You admit people that have a need, they show a potential, and they want it. If they don't have those factors involved, you're basically working for nothing. Whereas in a nursing home, it's very much a different story. It's everybody comes in and wants therapy. No, they don't. Anyway, I enjoyed it, but I'd see what you were talking about there, Dave, with the folks that, either from diabetes or from traumatic injury or whatever, or any other injury, will succumb to the pressures. And I can totally understand it because, the depression and the loneliness one can experience, I don't know as I've gone the depths, but I certainly have gone as deep as I want to go. So anyway, you got some choices in life, and one of the choices to be bummed out and think life sucks all the time, or the other choice is think, well, life can suck sometimes, but let's have a better day today. And I prefer to have a better day today.
Yeah, I like
way of thinking.
Yeah, I like that. I know a lot. I work in mental health, and depression it's real, and it can change your thoughts in a way that is totally unhelpful. And I wanted to ask, did you get any mental health counseling or anything like that during your recovery, or was it just kind of an attitude you took on yourself, kind of thing?
Well, I was really blessed. I won the lottery when I was born. A lot of people don't, if you're born in this country, you won the lottery, in my opinion. You're not born on the plains of the Sudan. starving without water. You're not born in Afghanistan. You're not born in China. You're not born in, some impoverished environment with no hope. So frankly, can't understand the Americans when they complain so much. I mean, for God's sakes, folks, you're born in a country that's free, or hopefully will remain free. But anyway, on another note, my parents were ahead of their time. My mother had a master's degree in this nursing back in the 60s and was essentially a PA long before there were PAs even designated in the health industry. My old man was an engineer, but he spoke 4 languages fluently.
Okay.
He knew classical music just in the first few stanzas of the passage. They were beautiful people, and they didn't train, they nurtured and loved us. And a lot of people don't get that when they're raised. I mean, they come from divided families. The parents aren't around. They let the television raise the kids. So I really feel blessed that I had the parents I had. And that to me was the best medicine that, I could have gotten.
Yeah,
The only drugs I do are pot and occasionally hallucinogens. But they want to give me painkillers for this, that, and the other. They want to give me antispasmodic medicine. They want to give me all sorts of garbage. And it's like, no. And they can't believe the health I'm in. I can saw the doctor yesterday, and he's like, yeah, you're in good health. So anyway.
Well, I agree. We know that, most of, how your ability to be resilient and your ability to handle stress is developed early on, typically age 5 and younger. Whatever, however you were raised and nurtured during that time has the biggest impact on how resilient you're going to be as an adult. So it sounds like, you had a really good upbringing, which was the number one reason, for your resilience later in life. And hearing your gratitude for that is refreshing.
That was 2 lottery tickets you won.
Yeah, definitely.
You got the lottery ticket with the financially, and then the lottery ticket with the nurturing, loving environment with your parents. I was fortunate to have a similar nurturing environment growing up, and I count that among my greatest blessings. So thanks, Mom and Dad.
Thumbs up on that one.
Yep. Hey, do you mind taking us back, though, to the accident itself and telling us about your experience after the motorcycle accident?
Sure. I can go right back to it. I recall the details as clear as it was yesterday. I mean, it's, ingrained in my head. I never lost consciousness. And probably a week or so after the accident, the officers who tended the scene that night came to the hospital to visit. And the one cop told me that in the 20 years he'd been a cop, he'd never seen anybody put a hole in the windshield with their head and live to tell the story. And yet when he showed up that night at the accident, I wasn't wearing a helmet, it was Arizona. That night when he showed up, I told him what day it was. I told him I knew I was in shock, but I told him I knew the time was about 8:30 in the evening. It was June 21st. I gave him my name, my wife's name, and I told him the number to call for help. And they were blown away. The number I gave him was my brother. I was going to see him actually that evening. And he beat the ambulance to the hospital. By the time my wife and I arrived at the hospital, he was already there. And as I passed through the doors, he's looking at me. He actually looked worse than I did, I think. He's freaking freaked out about it. I told him, I said, don't worry, things will be all right. And I was not talking about so much the loss of my leg or possibly the loss of my life, but inside, I would be all right. Seems kind of corny. But anyway, they worked on me right away. They wanted to work. My wife wanted them to work on her. And I told them, I said, work on her. And they said, no, you won't make it if we do. She's okay. Your injuries are more severe. Anyway, they worked on me, and they had to put me down, as it were. They had to knock me out before they took me into the OR. But all the while, they were working on me and asking me questions. And I was responding appropriately. And when I went out and they knocked me out, it was no dreams, no anything. I was out cold. Somewhere in the 6 hours they worked on me, between like 9 and 3 in the morning, I woke up, not on the table, not looking down at myself, ascending into the heavens or anything like Hollywood would have you believe, but I woke up like out of a bad dream, and all of a sudden I was traveling. I didn't have a body, a consciousness was all I had, and I was traveling. And I thought, holy shit, I'd done psychedelics before, and this was nothing like psychedelics. It was real. And anyway, that journey resulted in me reaching a destination, a room. And when I woke up in that room, they talk about a light. You hear these stories with people with near-death experience talk about a light. That is such a huge undersell. It's so much more than a light. It touches you. You feel with it. And not only that, you generate the light yourself. You're part of a light. Anyway, I had an experience that changed my life right then and there. I knew I was dead. I didn't want to come back here. I had a wife that loved me. I had a family that loved me. Keep it all. Come back to this world. Look at it. Freaking wars, poverty, cheating. Look at the guy they just voted into office. My God. I mean, he cheats on his wife when she's got a newborn kid. I don't understand it myself. Maybe I'm just too fucking old and need to get off the planet. But I'll tell you one thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's like I said before. Today's a perfectly good day to have a fucking good day. So fuck all those bastards.
Yeah. Why did you choose to come back? And was it a choice, or did you just come back? That you were sent back?
There was no choice. And this is what's so fucking confusing. Excuse my language.
You're good.
You know the Doors. Who the fuck doesn't know the Doors?
Right.
Jim Morrison. Now, Jim Morrison was already dead by 1979. He'd been dead about 10 years at this point. And I'm somewhere else. I'm not on Earth. I'm up in a body. I'm feeling great. I don't want to go back anywhere. I don't want to come back here. I got a job that just gave me a raise. I got the wife. I got all that. Don't want any of it. In my head, or that light that's communicating with me and talking with me, and I'm talking with it. We're all one. I hear that phrase from the song he sings, "You can't petition the Lord with prayer." And like I say, I don't believe in God. I believe that there's some sort of community, a oneness, if you will. There's no single entity that sits on a fucking throne. But anyway, there's no arguing, there's no debating, there's no, petitioning or whatever. I fell back into the floor and was completely freaking blacked out again, like I was under the drugs they'd given me. And time has no sense of relevance. But whenever I woke up in the recovery room, I saw my in-laws. And it was about 3:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, something like that. But it was an experience I'll never forget. I got hit so hard that the crankshaft on a 4-cylinder motorcycle got pushed out the other side of the engine.
Wow.
And you were awake the whole time.
And I remember flying over the car and hitting the windshield with my head. And 5 inches of my femur, I had a compound fracture, mid-shaft fracture of the femur. That 5-inch piece in the middle came right out of my leg after it sliced the femoral artery open, went right through the guy's grill on that 69 Ford Galaxy 500, passed through the radiator and lodged itself right inside the alternator. They found the car 2.5 miles down the road, out of water and out of battery. They didn't find him until they found the ticket under the seat. He was an alcoholic and a migrant farm worker and unemployed. And because they never read him his rights, the judge dismissed all the charges and he had no money. And the hospital told me I had to pay the bill.
Wow.
So the officers never read the Miranda rights properly, and he basically was off on a technicality after that. It's ridiculous.
That was it. There was no insurance. And, I'm a veteran, and that's the way they treat a veteran. Now my wife are $180,000 in hock for somebody running me over.
Hmm.
I told them what they could do with that bill. It's like I say, you come back from a place.
That's the kind of crap you got to come back to, is going in the hole. Now you had this. That's what's wrong with the planet.
5 or 6 years later, I was visiting my folks up in Maine, and my mother and I were talking. My folks were my best friends, and we're talking. And I told her, I said, the love that you and Father showed paled in comparison. And it's one of those things that sometimes you don't want to say, or you shouldn't have said, because it cut our heart. But what I was saying is that there's no comparison between what you feel there and what there is here, regardless of, I love my second wife beyond bounds. She died next to me in bed. I would have done anything to save her life, but yet she died alone. You are always alone. And that's one of the reasons that people get so caught up in fear, is they're not at peace with themselves. You really have to be at peace. You were talking about depression a while ago, Dave. Depression is a huge epidemic. It really is. I mean, people don't want to hear about it because, you're a Debbie Downer. Well, folks, wake up. It's like I was saying earlier, too, about the disconnect between us and nature. When you're just sitting out there, the birds and the insects and nature and listening to the water, there's something that it's not tangible. It's not like buying a new car, but it's something that touches you. And that's what's missing from our world.
Yeah, I agree. That was one of the things that really helped me after my combat experiences, was hiking, camping, that kind of, because it was the only thing that, like you said, it's not tangible, but I could feel it. And it was like somebody turned the dial down or something. And literally they did, because I'm away from all the, the signals and stuff in the city. But also, for the first time in my life, even when I was in Iraq, I never really looked up too often at the sky. And the sky there was incredible. But after that, being out in nature, especially places in the desert and stuff in California, you can really see the Milky Way.
Yeah.
It's like that changed my life, because it just made me feel like I was, part of something so much bigger. And that gave me a little bit of comfort. It sounds like, does that, like that light, that oneness you're talking about, does that give you comfort for the future?
It does. In all the years I did therapy, I'd come across, with my own wife. I mean, she was terminal with breast cancer and fought it for 3.5 years, and went from a woman that could hike with a pack on her back all day long to somebody that, could barely get out of bed. It gave her a great deal of comfort. And those folks I treated, as an OT, she never got to see me be an OT, actually. That relating the story about the light, and the sense that I don't believe, no matter what the attractions and enticements are here in the corporeal world, physical realm,
Material plane.
exactly, even come close to that of the energetic existence. Einstein and the others with the energy can't be created nor destroyed. What happens to the energy inside the body when we die? We leave this shell. And my thought is, there's lots of energy in the world and the universe. And I have come to the belief that in living matter, and I don't care what it is, a microbe, a human, that the energy that it generates is on a frequency.
Mhm.
And if that frequency harmonizes with the frequencies of others, it will coalesce into what I'm talking about, this light or field.
Right.
And that doesn't goes somewhere else. It coalesces with whatever or breaks down. Um, I think we're spending too much time on progress on material items and not enough time on progress looking inside ourselves.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was thinking about when you mentioned that earlier in materialism and how you can't take your stuff with you. It made me think of like all these kings and pharaohs and stuff who built giant pyramids and things like that, or and still none of it matters. None of it goes with them, you know?
Well, it's part of the fear. And it's been, you know, I think you were very right on the money there. And it's true. You know, with the backdoor and the hunter gatherers, the head of the show there, his ass was on the line just as much as everybody else. If they didn't come down, he was as hungry as everybody else. When you start having pharaohs, yeah, the pharaoh always ate well. You know, it's like now with the homelessness. Are they eating well? Is
Yeah.
Trump eating well? Is Elon Musk eating well?
Mm-hmm.
You know, equity. There is no equity in this system that we have here. And you know, look what they did to me. Go back to work, buddy. You know, one leg's not a disability. They're not even going to give you SSI. And I wasn't looking for a lifetime disability. I was looking for a little bit of help to literally get me back on my feet again. And anyway, it's, I tell people, and I've told this many times, I had a very dear friend of mine. This is why I decided to retire. He died on my living room floor at the age of 35. And I told him when he was applying for Social Security that what they do is basically three things. They either wait you out so you finally get frustrated and just say, oh, to hell with it and leave, or they wait you out and you die, or they eventually, after you've got a lawyer, pony up and cough up some cash to help you out. It's not a system of service. I mean, when you have cancer or you have a condition that's listed on their, you know, set of conditions they deem as approved, and they don't approve you, it's not about doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's about numbers.
It's like that
Not
poor
only-
exec. It's like that poor exec that just got bumped off. You know, I don't believe in murder, but boy, his organization doesn't have a problem with people dying.
No, they don't. You know, a lot of none of those organizations do when you really think about it. You know, the pharmaceutical companies as well, they're the same
Yep.
thing. You know, they literally have meetings where they go, okay, this drug might kill 50,000 people. Okay, I think that out of 10 million, that's not too bad. Here you go. We'll
No,
put that.
it's a price to pay. Price to pay for doing business.
Collateral damage, right?
Busyness.
Yep.
That's a big part of the root of the problems that we got here on planet Earth. And that's why I like what you're saying and appreciate what you're saying, Chris. Materialism, it's got to go. It's no good. And what's even worse than materialism, the pursuit is like the pursuit of money itself, not even the material. It's all phony. It's all funny. And we wonder why people are going around confused and depressed. They're after material possessions and money.
And Chris said something I thought was important is happiness is something you're not going to get from like reaching a goal or getting a certain item. It's something that is generated internally, which makes me think it's something to do with the light he's talking about as well.
But you can, when someone sees a light in another person, it can help turn the light on within that person, which is why we're doing this show and why we're sharing stories like your story, Chris. That's what we kind of do.
Dear friend who died on my living room floor at the age of 35 was born with half a heart. And he had a condition called atrioventricular hypoplasty and was only born with one ventricle and one atrium. And anyway, he received open heart surgery when he was less than a day old and 3 subsequent open heart surgeries to keep him going. And when I met him, he was a grad from SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. And anyway, he was working as a waiter at this place I used to frequent in Savannah. And we became very good friends because he too had experienced a near-death experience. And you were talking about the light in others. It was so fucking obvious with him that he'd been touched, man. We both, it was like I connected again and not on that other plane.
Yeah.
And when he died on my floor, I was like, I'm all done working. I can't work anymore. I can't help people. I'm busted. So anyway, I'm putting myself back together. You were asking how long it took? I'm still working on it.
Still working on it. I like it. I think that's, kind of the way, that's a good way to be a human, right? Is to keep growing and keep working on yourself and keep learning, right? I noticed that you get very emotional when talking about the light. And I'm curious, could I ask, like, what, is there a feeling that could you put a name on that feeling that you're feeling?
It covers the gamut, frankly, Dave, from an intense sort of love to a tremendous sorrow and pain. And that's what you're in, is the sorrow and pain.
Yeah.
Because I see potential. That's what's so disappointing, frankly. I see potential, for God's sakes, and I don't even believe in God, but I do see potential. And
potential on planet Earth, potential for humankind. Is that what you mean?
Well, potential for the human, for being, not the human race. Forget the human race; it's done. The human being has potential. The human race it's a disaster. There are people, and I've met them. Lucas, my dear friend, he had the light. To put a feeling on it, though, people have asked me this question: why don't you just shoot yourself or commit suicide? Get some fentanyl and OD and go be happy. And it's like, no, that's not.
No, I want to run into you again on Broadway next week. We'll go hang out for a minute. Don't do that.
But that's not happiness. That's comping out. That's like acquiescing to the accident, saying,
Right.
"Oh, the guy ran me over. Fuck, my life's over with now." Getting booted out of wherever I was, that communal system, is for me a motivation, a drive to make my life better and happier, to some sort of equality to that of what I experienced. And forget that, I'll never get to it, but I can get to it inside myself. And if I can emanate that and project it and model it to others, I'm very happy to do it.
Yeah, I think you're doing it.
I don't want to be a hypocrite. There's too much hypocrisy in this world.
Yeah,
that's what I see about Christians.
I did want to ask, what was your job in the military? What was your MOS?
Yeah, we've got time for this.
I was, they actually call it the AFSC, the Air Force Specialty Code.
Okay. We call it.
That's an Army term you're using there. But anyway, I was a nuclear missile mechanic working on Titan IIs, which were a liquid-fueled bird. Same as the Gemini bird, actually. I don't know if you recall the Gemini just before Apollo, but it was the same thing with a warhead on it.
Yeah.
And there were only 3 bases in the world that housed them, and that was in Tucson, in Little Rock, Arkansas, and in McConnell, Kansas. And at the time, and still to this day, I believe, they're the largest single nuclear warhead ever made for the military.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up a picture of one right now.
The whole system is weird.
So, and you worked in Arizona, so you worked directly with like constructing and
my job, they trained me as what they call a missile maintenance technician.
Okay.
And my job involved transporting the missiles to and from the base, because they were out in the silos, which were around the area of Tucson, transporting them to and from the site, putting them in and out of the hole. These birds are 110 feet tall and 10 feet in diameter, so they're a big bird. You're using a crane. We had to learn how to operate and set up a crane, transport the crane. We had to remove and install the engines. We had to ensure the thing wasn't leaking. There you go. That's the bird right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thrust ring. It's sitting down at the bottom. I've actually stood on that thrust ring before on many of those platforms that are up against the launch duct wall. But that's the RV sitting on top, the reentry vehicle. And we were always told it may be a mock warhead. And it's like, I don't think so. I think these babies are all pretty much loaded. But anyway, yeah, it's a year and a half. Well, not quite a year and a half. Probably more like a year before I got out of the service. I had been promoted a couple times during the course of events there, and because I'd broken my back on my neck in the service, I could do the toolbox. And they figured, well, let's make him a crew chief. And I don't know if you know about crew chiefs, but they're responsible for the plane or the bird. And in this case, I was responsible for the silo and the bird. And anyway, I learned that job inside and out, and they promoted me again to headquarters. And I was kind of a disgruntled service member at the time, not very happy. And it was very short before I got out, and one of my commanders came by, and he asked me, Airman Shannon, how's it going today? And the last thing you want to tell a commander is not very well, sir. And it froze him in his tracks, and he goes, what do you mean, Airman? And I proceeded to tell him why I didn't think things were going well with the Titan II system. And it was a year, get this, it was the month I got out of the hospital from being run over. A site in Little Rock, Arkansas blew up. A Titan II site blew up. They call it the Damascus incident. And
The Damascus incident.
The Damascus incident, yeah, just like over in Syria, I guess is where Damascus is. But anyway, yeah, it blew the site right up out of the ground and launched the warhead 100 yards away from the silo, and didn't go off, thank God. I think one person was killed, but I predicted that accident. And the commander just blew me off and told me I didn't know what I was talking about. But anyway.
Flashing the article on 1980 Titan missile explosion up really quick.
That's wild.
Okay, it was 80. I thought it was actually 79, but nope, September. I see that September in
This could be
80.
a totally different timeline anyway. That could be, your memory could be right, and this could be wrong.
That's true. Shifting timelines. We've shifted several timelines recently, and we intend to shift some more. That's why we're still doing the show.
Anyway,
go ahead.
I was going to say it was kind of obvious, though, because as a crew chief, you're required to check that silo inside and out. And believe me, I used to crawl in places people would never crawl into. And being my old man was an engineer, I knew what was safe and what not was safe. Safe and Depot, the people who built the bird and silo, they were always putting in retrofits so it could last longer. It was past its engineered life expectancy. Mm-hmm. So here you have a bird, a very dangerous weapon, volatile, just sitting there, becoming more dangerous because it's already past its engineered life expectancy, and the troops are getting less training. And we had the lowest re-enlistment rate of any branch of any service. Our AOMS or whatever, or Air Force Specialty Code, AFSC. The two lines are going to cross, and when they cross, all hell's going to break loose, and you're going to lose the sight. And that's what I tried to explain to this full bird colonel, and he just blew me off like, Airman, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, sir, the sights are old, the crews are getting less training. I see it here on the paper. It's not going to work out well. And like I say, I guess it was 2 years after I got out, then it blew up.
Yeah, that's typical. The people at the top not listening to the people who are right there looking at everything with eyes on everything. And you're the guy who's in charge of the whole silo and everything that goes on in there. You'd think he'd want to hear that, but sometimes people only want to hear, what confirms their bias. So.
Well, I did such a good job being a crew chief. They promoted me to headquarters, where I
Mhm.
was a debriefer, and basically you covering everybody that goes out to all the various sites and monitoring their work. It's sort of like a head crew chief. But anyway, that's when they asked me this question,
Mhm.
and I was very close to getting out. But what was I going to go say with this? Oh, they did listen to me because I was complaining to my boss. I'd come in every morning and they'd tell me, oh, they're pissed off because there's a 10% error rate in the computer run list for the discrepancies on the site and on the missiles. And they don't want that discrepancy. They want to know exactly what needs maintenance and when it needs maintenance, and 10% error rate's not cutting it. And it's like, well, there's no fucking rocket scientist to figure that one out, buddy. You got crews coming back at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 at night. You all pack up and go home at fucking 5. No wonder you have a fucking discrepancy. And well, what do you think? I said, you should have somebody work second shift. Go tell them that. Anyway, so I went into the commander's meeting at 8:30 in the morning. Fucking, majors and full bird colonels. And anyway, I got introduced. They all knew what the hell it was. And I told them the reason they were ranting and raving is because they didn't have a second shift picking up all that late maintenance. And so they said, you got the job. And within a couple months, fucking maintenance error rate came down to less than 2%.
Tremendous.
They were happy. They were happier.
Oh yeah.
And then somebody took my fucking job. It was a sweetheart job because you didn't have anybody breathing down your neck.
Mhm.
And after I got things up and running and proud of myself, my boss comes up to me and goes, Tooth wants your job. And because Tooth had another stripe on his sleeve, he got my job. That's how
And
that works.
You got out shortly after that, though, right?
Yeah, I got out of that. And as I rode out the gate, I took my little fatigue cap and hurled it at the gate.
Oh,
The guard shacked it. Said, take that, son of a bitch. But anyway, I got
Hey, you
some of the
did-
best training available from the military. I mean, they
Yeah, me
trained me on stuff that is still cutting edge today.
Yeah, I noticed they're still using those Titan 2s. I think.
10-3s, actually. But they
Okay.
got side boosters strapped to them now. But
Got it.
yeah, I keep up with all that stuff, and they're going down there the wrong road again. I wrote Mr. Musk 2 letters and never heard back from him.
So I ask every one of our guests this, Chris, but I think it's like appropriate considering you worked on nuclear missile silos.
Mhm.
But I like to so you always hear the stories of like UFOs going around nuclear missile silos and like there's literally reports have happened where UFOs have shut down missile silos, their capabilities, turned off all their computers and stuff. I was just curious if you've ever heard anything like that or if you've ever seen anything weird at a missile silo.
Well, the weirdest thing I can tell you about a missile silo, I can tell you several weird stories, but this particular story has more to do with what you're talking about. Is a crew got to do their maintenance because it's 24/7 operation out at the site. And they got there to do their maintenance sometime early in the evening. And their maintenance didn't wrap up until 4 or 5 in the morning. And, they're out in the middle of freaking desert down there in Arizona. And the site sit back off the road by access roads, probably a good quarter mile, half mile back. I mean, it's a fairly good stretch. And they come up out of the site. What do they see? They see a small Cessna sitting on the freaking access road and a big pickup truck and a bunch of bales sitting on the ground. And of course, the lights all come on when the crew comes up topside. The plane freaks the frick out, starts the motor, flies away. The truck drives off, and they leave 4 bales of pop sitting there on the access road at the missile site. Anyway, they end up, calling the people because once you come up out of the ground, you can't go back down in. It's all done.
Right.
So they get on the phone, they tell the commander downstairs, the commander calls up the local sheriff calls the state police, and they had a little convoy escorting the marijuana back to base because it was found on government property. It returned to base, and the base did an investigation about it. And I told the crew chief, I said, man, you were freaking stupid. Should have shut your freaking mouth, put it in the freaking pickup truck and drove it over to the house and dumped it off and, supplement
that's
your income.
hilarious.
We all would have had a great year. You guys would have had an awesome year that year.
Do you think the smugglers had any idea that they were linking up right outside of a silo installation?
Oh, I'm sure they did. I mean, there's landing lights because they have helicopters that land there. Well, I was doing the crew chief gig. That's how I got back and forth to the site. I would call up in the evening and say, I'm all done. They'd send a helicopter out.
Yep.
The morning, I'd just walk out the bank and go over to the hangar bay and say, hey, I'm going out to 07. They'd fly me out.
Wow.
Kind of interesting life for the first few weeks you're flying, and then it gets really kind of mundane and boring. It's like,
Yeah,
I've done this before.
Like everything in
You
the
probably
military.
know what I'm talking about.
I do, yes.
cool. Thanks for sharing that experience with us. Dave and I are interested in all that stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great meeting you, Dave. Mike, probably see you around town there. And, you know, we'll see where we are in a month. Maybe I'll have a socket I can show you.
Yeah.